Gerry Adams, a name that will go down in history as one of the most famous Irish politicians of all time. To some, he provokes feelings of fear and hatred. To others, he is a synonym of the Republican struggle and of the Irish peace process. Gerry Adams' political career is world-renowned, mostly for his controversial character. But who is the man behind the politician, and what is in store for him in the years to come?
And the following is the result of count 1. Adams, Gerry, Sinn Féin, 15,000.
No, totally. I mean, I'm really happy that I didn't go to Westminster. I mean, I'm entirely satisfied that that was the appropriate and democratic thing to do. I don't see any way in this time how the cause of Ireland, whether you're unionist or nationalist or Republican, can be advanced in the British Parliament. It represents British interests, not Irish interests.
Gerry's pathway to contesting and indeed winning the Louth seat is much simpler than many people out there suspect. And it's simple because I wasn't going to go again. In fact, I almost didn't go in 2007. I almost didn't contest the election in 2007. I was concerned, and so were others, that if I did not contest it, that we might have lost the seat. And so on that basis, I decided, yes, I agreed with Gerry that I would contest the seat on that occasion in 2007. But we did shake hands on an agreement that was it, that I was finished, that I wouldn't be contesting the election again. And so really it became a matter of who then would step into the position and contest the seat. And everybody here was over the moon, absolutely delighted that Gerry was coming to take on this challenge. And it would be a challenge from somebody from outside to come in and attempt to win the seat. But he did that. And not just did he do it, but he did it spectacularly by achieving more than 16,000 first preference votes, more than 2,000 votes above the quota.
With a long career of standing up to the British authorities in Ireland, Gerry Adams is very familiar with Northern Ireland's use of the internment method, prison without trial.
I first met Gerry Adams in approximately 1977, although I had seen him at Ardeshina, at Sinn Féin Ardeshina, party conferences on many occasions before that. And I met him first in jail, actually, probably no surprise there, in the H blocks at Long Kesh. We were both on remand at the time, and got to know him quite well. We were in the same wing of the block, the H2 it was. And of course, I've got to know him considerably better over the years.
So it was almost accepted that if you were arrested, you could be interned. And it was almost accepted because there were so many people being interned, the Republicans and nationalists. But I was interned first on a prison ship, the Maidstone, which was a prison ship in Belfast Loch. And we were held below decks. The food was crap. The conditions for visitors were awful. But it was around the time, 1972, when the British assumed direct rule. This was after Bloody Sunday. And our protest was ongoing at that time, and Muddy Whitelaw, who was the first British Secretary of State, closed the Maidstone. And we were shipped to Long Kesh. And it was like getting to Butlins. It was like getting to a holiday resort. And I know many people who have served 14 years, 16 years, 17 years, 22 years. So 4.5 years, I think, is a very short period. And I probably spent, I can't remember, but I probably spent, well, certainly in that 4.5 years, there were at least 4 Christmases or 3 Christmases.
Gerry Adams has been involved in politics since the 1960s, witnessing firsthand some of the biggest events in Ireland's modern history. As a politician, he has acquired a highly controversial, cantankerous reputation. But it is the inward determination and force of Gerry Adams, the man, which has enabled the politician within him to thrive, despite the considerable pressures his career has come under.
For almost 30 years, I represented the people of West Belfast. I am humbled and appreciative of the heroism, the generosity and the courage of that community. And I'm equally honoured to represent the citizens of Louth and East Meath, And alongside our councillors there, I will continue the pioneering work of my predecessor, Arthur Morgan, in that Dáil Ciantar.
The politics I like to be part of are politics which empower people and which would see political representatives as tribunes of the people, but also conduits for the people to have their rights and to be able to have a meaningful say in society. I don't think Westminster does that. I don't think our systems in Ireland do it yet. But politics all the time is in a need for renewal and reimagining and regenerating. To be truly democratic, it has to be organic. As I understand Irish freedom, it's first of all the freedom of the people of this island to govern ourselves, and then it's for the freedom of every citizen to have rights and entitlements. What has happened because the war has been brought to an end is that different other modes of struggle, different other more pragmatic ways to achieve those objectives. Because of the economic upheaval in this part of Ireland, because of the deep distress that many people now feel, like 500,000 people unemployed, tens of thousands of people emigrating, cuts in health services, in special needs assistance, in hospitals and all of that, and the handing over of economic sovereignty to the IMF and the EU. It's a very challenging political time, and some of those who helped to create that circumstance feel quite hostile to what Sinn Féin is saying, because we're arguing for very basic citizen-based, rights-based, Irish sovereignty-based ways forward. Oh, absolutely. I think all the wisdom is that Ireland as a single island unit, whether it's a single island economy or a single political unit, it just makes sense, and increasingly people are more comfortable with that concept. Even people who may want to retain the link with Britain do see the good sense, like agriculturally, even for animal safety. It makes sense to have a single island approach. For energy needs, it makes sense. For health, I mean, if you're on one side of an artificial border, and there's a better service for cardiac or for cancer treatment or for some other ailment, on the other side of the border, it just makes sense to join all of that up. It also makes sense that you shouldn't be competing.
The hunger strike of 1981 marks one of the most influential periods in the conflict between Britain and Ireland. It was another means by which the IRA fought Britain's involvement in Irish politics. For a while, the world turned their eyes towards the conflict in Ireland. But while many people merrily watched from afar, the aftermath of the hunger strike can still be felt by those who experienced or witnessed it firsthand.
I know many people have been killed. Family members have been killed. Friends have been killed. Neighbours have been killed. But there's something about the hunger strike that just catches you. It was a very, very unique period. These guys went on hunger strike because of the conditions they were living in the prison. It became a battle between a British government and a small group of prisoners. It became a battle of wills between Thatcher and Bobby Sands and his comrades.
Obviously the hunger strike was a huge low, even though it was now regarded as a high internationally because of where it brought the whole Republican struggle to and the whole Irish freedom struggle to. It was very much a low because people our comrades were dying, and in a very slow, painful way. That was, marks the lowest of my life. But, from that came an awareness among Republicans of what could be achieved.
because there was a very, very concerted attempt to criminalise a struggle, and it failed. And because of the sacrifice of the prisoners and the generosity of the prisoners, it was Thatcher in the eyes of big parts of the world, and certainly nationalist Ireland, who was criminalised as a result of that. Like Bobby ended up with more votes than she. So that accelerated the whole process of electoralism within Sinn Féin. We had been working on that, but the success of the prisoners increased the tempo, and arguably was the first real seeds of a peace process.
We, my 6 comrades, are prepared to go through with this, and we are prepared to die to prove that we are special prisoners and our 5 basic demands are just.
Let your spirit shine along the way, and our day will surely come. Yet the heart
Sands, Bobby, anti-H block, Armagh, political prisoner, 30,492.
When I consider Gerry's achievements and to try and hone them down so far, because there's probably more to come, clearly it's the development of the peace process, the execution of that peace process, to pull all those bits together, to have the patience and the fortitude to be able to tolerate the nonsense that was going on occasions from the Dublin government, on occasions from the London government, and other times, or almost all the time, from the whole unionist group. But I think that's a huge, huge legacy for any person to carry.
Ireland is very much an island in transition. There's an ongoing transition in the north because of the peace process and the outworking of all of that, and people trying to reconcile and deal with the legacy of conflict, and politicians trying to make friends, or at least to build working relationships. And then in the south, because of the economic upheaval and all of the great developments after a very, very greedy, corrupt elite destroyed the wealth that had been developed in the Celtic Tiger era.
It was frustrating for everybody at the time, I think, but particularly for Gerry, because from the very beginning of his strategising in relation to the development of a peace process, he knew that one of his greatest challenges would be to try and get a nationalist consensus, or pan-nationalist agreement, as it was described at the time, which involved the SDLP, and lucky enough John Hume was at the head of that party and a very powerful leader at the time, and he agreed readily to it. But even John Hume was criticised very sharply by political commentators and politicians here in the south, people who were part of the political establishment. But in any event, John Hume worked with Gerry and Martin McGuinness to roll out the peace process, and the other strand of that pan-nationalist element was, of course, the Dublin government, and it was very difficult to get them on board because they, as I said, they had a very narrow view of what was required. But nevertheless, Gerry persisted.
There were certainties in life here which have now been removed, and to a large extent, I think that's a good thing. I think the cost of removing them has been too high, but I still think it's a good thing that now people are potentially more liberated and more free thinking.
I have no doubt that some of the frustration that Gerry experienced during that challenging time is probably still there when we see the mishandling of the economic crisis that's prevailing in the country here at the moment, because the government are so ham-fisted that it's probably going to take a considerably greater number of years to build our way out of this crisis, this economic crisis, than is necessary.
So the question is this: the motion, can it be taken tonight in government time? Fianna Fáil have indicated their desire to support it. Can the government support it, and can be taken in government time so that we get this?
They're doing at this time exactly what the last government did, and in total contradiction of what they promised to do during the election. So during the election, they promised not to put one red cent into bad banks. They're putting €3 billion every year for the next 10 years into bad, toxic banks. They promised not to cut social welfare. They're clearly going to do that. Before Christmas, they will, depending on who you talk to, take upwards to 4 and perhaps as many as €6 billion out of the budget, and most of that will come from health infrastructure and other necessary public services. So when the likes of me or some of my colleagues gets up and challenges this, then you get a lot of heckling and messing.
Quiet now, you're doing the job.
You won't say quiet to me, sir.
It's economically counterproductive because there is a social consequence if you have to cut education, health, social welfare. That will bring about an increasingly polarised society. It will deepen the recession. You can't cut your way out of a recession. You have to grow the economy, and that essentially means that you have to get people back to work. Sinn Féin always had a view that the economy should serve the people. So you have to use your surplus to build a society which is holistic and which can be inclusive and which is based upon the rights of citizens. So if you're a citizen, you have certain entitlements. You have the entitlement to access to education, to a home, to being treated equally whether you...
My name is Donaldson. I worked as a Sinn Féin Assembly Group Administrator in Parliament buildings.
Since it was founded in 1905, the Sinn Féin party has been known for its strong republican character. With the objective to end British rule in Ireland, the revelation of a British spy in their midst was bound to reach breaking news across the world. But while the news of Denis Donaldson's life as a double agent may have surprised the world, the Sinn Féin leader states,
Denis was not the central figure in Sinn Féin that sometimes he is portrayed as. And, to my certain knowledge, the investigation into his killing has yet to be pursued with the type of vigour that is required, and there are lots of questions around his killing which have yet to be answered. Believe it or not, you become used to working in an atmosphere where you know there are agents and you know that there are spies, and you have to be careful about who you trust because you could be killed. Your friends could be killed. You could be in all sorts of difficulties, or you could be in prison for long periods. What we had decided to do was to do a press conference that he would attend and make a statement of his involvement with the British. And my conversation with him was fairly limited to that. I remember passing him on the corridor, and he said hello, Gerry, and I said hello, Denis. And I felt very sad for him because I knew that was him finished, with republicanism, with his Republican family, with, he was a very popular figure around the place, very affable sort of a guy. And in terms of his involvement with the British, obviously he has to take responsibility for his own actions, and arguably he did that by admitting to what happened. But the fact that he was killed in the end, of course, he was a fatality of the conflict. I heard about this just after 6 o'clock. I want to condemn without reservations this very brutal killing. I want to extend condolences to the Donaldson family. I want to dissociate Sinn Féin and all of those scores of thousands of, hundreds of thousands of Irish Republicans who support the peace process from this killing. I think the peace process is ample evidence that you can do the impossible, or what seemed to be the impossible. Even the imagery of my friend Martin McGuinness being in government with Ian Paisley. You know, people would never have believed that, and for them to become friends in the course of that. And similarly with Peter Robinson, and to have, you know, ceasefires and the IRA removed from the scene, and the other, the British Army off the scene, and you know, all that has been developed, even though it's an ongoing process, shows that people in this island are quite capable and intelligent and resilient and willing to do big things. For a long time, republicanism was depicted as being the IRA. And while you know, I have supported the IRA and would see it as a legitimate response to what was happening, and wouldn't stand over all of its actions, indeed would be very critical of some of its. If you're at war, you have to dehumanise your opponent or your enemy in order to be at war. So the Republicans become terrorists, they become gangsters, they become criminals. All of this sort of shorthand of nonsense that's used to demonise people. But now, if you're going to talk to someone and listen to them, then you have to start, you know, just even the civic nicety of saying hello to someone. Then all of that, it changes, and then people start to see things from a different perspective, and I think that's what's happened. If I'm going to get to wherever I want to go, and I have to take you or them with me, then I have to figure out how to do that and why they wouldn't do it. And all of that, I think, is at the core of what's been happening in Ireland certainly for the last 20, 25 years. And if I have any regrets, it is that there was a conflict and that it went on for as long as it did. I'm glad that I survived it. I'm glad that many people will never, ever have to live in those conditions again. I'm particularly delighted. Some people say to me, young people take all this for granted. And I think it's great that they do so. I don't really have any great personal ambitions, to tell you the truth. I would like to be an opera singer. I haven't had the opportunity to develop. I would like to write more. I would like to cook more. I would like to garden more. I have volumes of books on all sorts of things, from building stone walls to growing organic vegetables. I love planting trees. I would love to plant 4 or 5 forests in the time ahead. And I absolutely love music. I couldn't imagine life without music. And so there's lots to be done, but there's also lots of politics to be made and struggle to be pursued. And I consider myself very lucky. I remember Martin McGuinness saying one time in an interview, he never thought he'd live beyond 25. And I never thought I'd live beyond 25. So it's good to be 63. It's brilliant to be still able to run and walk and talk and enjoy yourself.